I think politics has become um, so about the echo chamber now, um, and so balkanized more so than at any other point, largely because of the internet and because like you have the ability to escape into that echo chamber anytime that you want. You don't have to work very hard to find one, and in fact, it will find you because of advanced targeting when it comes to whether it's Facebook groups, if you're on there, internet communities, etc., YouTube, TikTok. Um, in terms of the algorithms that target you. So like it used to be that you'd have to go off and decide, you know what, I'm tired of hearing somebody else's opinion. Let me go find an echo chamber. Now the echo chamber seeks you out and traps you in. And you don't even know that you're in. You think, well, I'm reasonable and I speak to other reasonable people. You don't realize you're in an echo chamber.
Want to listen to this episode ad-free? Head on over to our Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and get a free trial for the ITBR professor level. And you can actually watch this episode as a video episode as well. While you're at it, did you know that on Spotify, we now have a subscription service for $10 a month? You get access to all of our ad-free episodes plus any bonus episodes. So make sure that you rate, review, and follow the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Make sure that you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. And follow Mary DePippi's show, True Crime in Academia, at True Crime in Academia. Thank you all for your support. And without further ado, here's today's episode.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
There are two posts from William Ferraro that I want to read because he just posted them on his Facebook. And I feel that it so speaks to the heart of why we recorded this episode, which was recorded before the Free Palestine College protests, before Arizona enacted a civil war law to outrightly ban abortion, before librarians possibly can be arrested for disseminating LGBTQ plus books. So William just posted this a day ago. Regular middle class people being virtually shut out from holding political office at the local and state level, with the exception of endorsement and funding from the wealthy, and completely shut out at the federal level, bar none, is itself a crisis for American democracy. And then he said about the protests, large-scale protests are messy. You can't control who shows up. Discrediting an entire movement because 1 out of every 10 people who attend a protest believe or say batshit crazy things would mean that every protest would have to be discredited. And that's exactly how people sought to discredit every protest, from Vietnam to Iraq, WTO, Occupy, BLM, and now Free Palestine. And with that, here is today's episode about, can we actually engage in healthy political dialogue in America? What happens when we challenge capitalism and see maybe there's another way of doing things that's healthier for the country, where the people, the demos, that's what democracy means, rule by the people, demos, a Greek word, that disrupting the system is necessary, and it's also so American. And that, yes, hopefully we can start to have more civil and healthy dialogue about where we think the future of the country is going and how we can embrace one another and not turn our backs on our neighbors. I hope you all enjoy this episode. A special thank you to the April Virtual Book Club members. We read Wicked by Gregory Maguire, and I'm going to be releasing that book club episode soon on our Patreon, because if you're a Patreon member, you actually can listen back to our book club discussions, which is really exciting. And thank you to the book club members for allowing that to happen. So, for May, I actually have a poll up right now on ivorytowerboilerroom.com. Scroll down to events and you'll see that neck and neck. It really is neck and neck. Right now, the two books are either The Book of Gothel by Mary McMinn, which is a retelling of Rapunzel, but from Gothel, Mother Gothel's viewpoint, who's seen as a villain, similar to Elphaba and Wicked, or we're going to read Blonde by Joyce Carol Oates, which fictionalizes Marilyn Monroe's life and is what the Netflix film was based on. So please get your votes in as soon as possible, and I'll announce the winner on May 1st. But again, it's not necessarily a winner because I think we're going to read the other book in June since it is so close. And it's such a heated contest for which book we're going to read. And also, you can put in a book that you recommend for us to read, and I'm definitely going to take that into account. Let's just say we might be reading The Great Gatsby this summer because I think we're going to see it on Broadway. Sorry for the interruption, but this is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and I have to talk to you all about the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Yes, you might be saying, but wait, aren't I listening to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room? You are. You're listening to the podcast. But when I'm not here in the podcast space, I'm actually consulting. So I have small businesses that I help consult with their social media marketing plan. I help fellow podcasters or those who are looking to go into podcasting. And I've also just met with a client, and I can't wait for her podcast to come out. So I've also helped those in the college admission process with their essay editing. I helped someone on her thesis and actually edited and helped consult her all the way through her thesis. I'll help you with your dissertation since I just got done my dissertation last summer. So you can reach out to me at ivorytowerboilerroom@gmail.com. Yes, I monitor my email every day. My first hour consultation is done virtually usually, and it's $30 for the first hour, and then we'll figure out what plan will work for you. So again, you can reach out to me via email, or you can also look me up on Google, Ivory Tower Boiler Room. You'll see my cell phone number there. Please do feel free to call me or DM me on Ivory Tower Boiler Room's Instagram. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room for all things challenging the old guard in industries, organizations, culture, politics, which we're going to get a lot of discussion with my featured guest here. So I actually know this guest, William Ferraro. I know Will because we work out at the same gym, LA Fitness, but it's nice to know someone in my backyard, which doesn't always happen. Like I'm, zooming with people from Australia and around the world, which is always exciting. But I know Will, so I can read a few facts about him. He was born and raised in Port Jefferson Station. He lives on Long Island. He's born and raised on Long Island. He attended Suffolk County Community College, St. John's University. He has a master's in public policy from Stony Brook. So, we share a Stony Brook connection. He has a black belt in judo. He's a former competitive martial artist. He owned and operated a low-cost martial arts school in Selden, which is where he's a homeowner. And I'm reading all of these facts because he ran for town supervisor of Suffolk County as a Democrat. So we're going to dissect a lot about the Democratic Party and things that are shifting, and maybe there's some low morale right now when it comes to politics. Yeah. And he was a former New York State Senate and Assembly analyst. He helped write bills and advise elected leaders in Albany. Yeah, I think that's enough to get you all your interest whetted and excited about William. So Will, welcome to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I know when we were preparing for this conversation, I was just expressing my lack of morale right now for the Democratic Party, which I'm a member of. So I'm okay opening up about political conversations right now, just because I feel like if I'm honest and transparent, it'll, resonate and translate with the listeners out there, no matter their
Yeah.
political party. Um, why do you feel like right now there's just such a lackluster response to any political conversation?
Well, it depends on the conversation. You brought up the gym. If you go to the gym in the locker room, you start ranting about Joe Biden and his policies, you probably get quite a spirited conversation. If you go to a protest in New York City or another urban area or at a campus and you start ranting about a number of topics, you get a very different response. I think politics has become um, so about the echo chamber now. Um, and so balkanized more so than at any other point, largely because of the internet and because like you have the ability to escape into that echo chamber anytime that you want. You don't have to work very hard to find one, and in fact it will find you because of advanced targeting when it comes to whether it's Facebook groups, if you're on there, internet communities, etc., YouTube, TikTok, in terms of the algorithms that target you. So like it used to be that you'd have to go off and decide, you know what, I'm tired of hearing somebody else's opinion. Let me go find an echo chamber. Now the echo chamber seeks you out and traps you in. And you don't even know that you're in. You think, well, I'm reasonable and I speak to other reasonable people. You don't realize you're in an echo chamber. Um, so that's why, but in terms of like low morale, I'll speak from the Democratic side because it is extremely low morale. And I think it has to do with a number of things. I think the president has reneged on a lot of promises, or just has not been what a lot of people hoped on the Dem side, which is scary because a lot of them only voted him in because they didn't want Trump in there anymore. And it was kind of this mentality of we just need the candidate who's known the most, who has the best chance of winning, and just shut up about anybody else. We just get him in there, and we'll figure it out later. Well, now later has come. We might get the other guy back in office. Locally in Suffolk County, there are a whole host of reasons why there's low morale here. Not every Democratic Party is in the doldrums the way that we are at the moment. And there's a whole historical reason for that, which I'm not going to bore you with. We can get into that maybe later. But, the party has basically been mismanaged and driven into the ground. And the result has been record losses. Terms of like the last couple of decades, right? Like the Democratic Party in Suffolk County is at its lowest point. So it's just, from a young person perspective, you see what's going on with Israel and Gaza. It is just heartbreaking to see. I mean, I'm very much against this war, so I'll just lead with that. And if you feel that way, which many do, especially people in the younger age group, and you see that, it is demoralizing. And then it's demoralizing to see your own party, and in some cases, like both parties, have nothing to say about what's going on other than just backing what Israel is doing. And again, I'm not trying to make people feel uncomfortable. Maybe they feel differently than me. I'm just saying this is how I feel, and there are a lot of people who feel that way who are now demoralized in the party. So it's just not a good time. Some of that is historical, like you get one party in power. The Dems until recently had the Senate and the House of Representatives and the White House. So all that leaves is for the opposition to be spirited. Just like when Trump was in, it was probably the best time ever for the Democratic Party as far as wins go and momentum and feeling like there's a movement and getting volunteers. Because we had nothing. And so it's so much easier to find momentum and find enthusiasm when you're in the minority, at least at first. And then when those losses are fresh, it can be demoralizing when you're the party in power. So that's kind of a historical thing.
Well, I'm glad you brought up when Trump was in power, but I'm even thinking recently to the pandemic, right? There was so much fervor and I don't want to say excitement, but there was a collective gathering of the Black Lives Matter movement, which was spurred by, George Floyd and Elijah McClain and, so many other innocent, Black men and women who lost their lives. with police brutality. Then there was the Me Too movement, you know, with everything that really hit the wall with Harvey Weinstein as just a figurehead for what was going on. Um, and then we also had just everything leading up to the 2020 election. I just remember how many protests were happening about like securing democracy. So like
Yeah.
all of that base and that energy, do you feel that it's a negligence on, say, the Biden campaign for taking for granted Democratic voters or progressive voters and not really in like collectively bringing these groups together? Like, where are these groups? Like, where are the people who I had protested with? Because I don't really see any of us gathering together.
Well, as someone who's been to protests, but I'm not like some full-time protester, I usually just go to the big ones when I really feel that there's like some momentum and something behind it. I will go. And that's selfishly as somebody who organizes in the Democratic Party and like currently I'm the District 3 leader for the Brookhaven Town Democratic Committee. I'd run for Brookhaven Town Supervisor. So within the Democratic Party of Brookhaven, I'm an executive board member, and I basically am in charge of organizing and recruiting candidates. And I also run many campaigns, or I've run a few campaigns locally. I'm not going to take credit for everything, every campaign that's been run recently, because a lot of them have been run quite terribly. But like I ran back-to-back special elections where we came really close to winning this past year. And I'm in charge of like recruiting candidates in my area, and that area is Selden, Center Reach, parts of Port Jeff Station, Lake Grove, Farmingville, etc. So with that said, I would go to a number of these protests, and I would participate. I mean, I felt strongly and still do about the Black Lives Matter movement, right? I can't speak for any nonprofit that calls themselves Black Lives Matter, but in terms of the movement and the ideas behind it, I was very supportive, and I showed up at the Farmingville protest. I helped organize a protest against now Justice Brett Kavanaugh, which was kind of like centered around the whole Me Too movement. You know, when he was up for his appointment for the Supreme Court. So I've been at March for Our Lives, like I've been at the big one. So what I can tell you is, with every movement, you have to understand from the mindset of an organizer and somebody who's interested in keeping people involved, there's a shelf life with people's interests. With any big movement, you can take a room of like a 1,000 people, like let's say there's 1,000 at a protest, which is pretty large for Long Island. Out of that 1,000, maybe 10% will stick around and look to like keep going. Most are just there because it's the zeitgeist, it's the feeling, it's the energy, it's the emotion. Sometimes for people it's a social gathering. Some people just show up with their friends, to be honest, and that's okay. You know, it's the passion of the street, it's the passion of the moment. Passion isn't always intellectual or level-headed, nor is it supposed to be. So what happens is the passion of these protests, some people come and say things that might sound outlandish. Somebody comes and says, defund the police. Does that represent, does every single person at the protest think like, yeah, take away all police funding? No. If you ask most of them, okay, do you think police budgets are bloated and we should be spending a lot of that money on other things like social services? I think most would agree. I would agree with that, right? But now that's labeled as defund the police. Somebody might show up with a sign and call cops pigs or something like that. That might not represent everybody, but that's one person who shows up and acts stupid. Some person shows up and blocks traffic like they did at the Farmingville Black Lives Matter protest. Everybody went out in the street and got them and said, don't do that. You're making us look bad. And it was over, right? But like that one moment, if captured on film, will be made to make the movement look bad. So my point in bringing that up is, to every action, there's a reaction. Now the other side is going to have to counter. So what happens is they'll take the worst of a movement. They'll take the worst examples of somebody just letting their passion get the better of them. And they will then put that on TV and say, this is them. And then they'll have a whole movement around that. So the reaction to Black Lives Matter was Blue Lives Matter and the black and blue flag. And that was the time for the movement to kind of push back and say, look, we don't hate cops, but we are standing up to, they don't see you, buddy. I have a blurred out screen in the background. That's my son. I knew he was going to come out and try to get on camera. But when that reaction comes, the movement has to be ready. And I don't think the movement was ready, nor was it ready back when Occupy Wall Street happened in 2008. I don't think there was a clear idea of how to move on next. I mean, in this case, it's not so much like the fault of protesters. What happened is that like the expectation that, okay, all of this work is being done to organize and create a movement, and surely there will be politicians who take up our cause, right? Well, what happened is almost none of them did, outside of like, New York City, and even then a lot of those folks didn't. And that's demoralizing. And then what happens is a lot of those folks who showed up at the protest who might have been willing to continue say, you know what? I told you so. All these guys are full of shit. Politicians lie to everybody. What's the point? Why am I even going to show up? It's all rigged. Don't even vote. And that's what happens. And I can't totally blame them for having that outlook. That outlook is wrong, and I can explain to them why it's wrong, but they're not going to hear that, because the one chance that they gave us in the Democratic Party, or us as organizers, or just people in general who involved in politics, is what was lost. They gave us a chance and it was lost. So I think that's a big reason why. But like, to really encapsulate, it's really like as a movement, you have to be ready for the pushback. But it's not just on the organizers of that movement and the people of the street, right? It's also on politicians to say, hey, how can we capture the energy of that movement and incorporate it into what we do, and back them up with policies and proposals to help. And there were many examples who did. I think there was a DA elected in like Philadelphia, like a really progressive DA who started making changes. Like there are examples of some really socially progressive DAs who were elected who made some good justice reform changes. But then other things happen, like, okay, New York is a perfect example. We did get a major justice reform policy called bail reform. Now, the way it was done was very sloppy. There wasn't really a debate over it. It was just kind of like put into a budget bill and everyone was forced to vote on it. Mm-hmm. So like there wasn't, the Democrats, who were the ones who put it in under Cuomo, they didn't take the time to build a public trust and have that discussion about it. There were polls that came out at that time. I think there was like June 2020 or thereabouts. Maybe it was the year after, where polling showed that the majority of people, including Republicans, supported the idea of bail reform. But then once it's instituted, without any PR behind it and like working to build support, Republicans pushed back with all the negative campaigning, and that changed the public's mind. So it really became like an anchor around the neck of people running for office. And the Dems ran from that, like right away ran from bail reform. Didn't even attempt to figure it out or try and explain the benefits of it. It was just, nope, we have nothing to do with this. You're going to get crushed. The Republicans believe in PR and building consensus or building support behind what they do and convincing people. And the Democrats feel like we're just going to meet people where they are. What do you believe? You believe that? Okay, we'll do that. Well, when the other side's manipulating that audience and that public into believing what they want them to believe, that's where you're going to meet them at. You're going to find a heavily right-wing public that has been influenced by the other side. And I'll just end this off by saying, like, the public in general is very malleable. You're going to have your people who are hardened left, hardened right, but most people can be convinced and know that it's popular now to say in politics, oh, you can't convince people anymore. That's bullshit. You can absolutely do it, but it takes time. It takes effort. And one party puts, when I tell you zero effort, the Democratic Party puts zero effort into changing minds, into changing hearts and minds. It's just like, well, we're right. So you want to be right like us? I can convince people. And they're going to think you're arrogant saying
well,
it that way.
And that's when you get accusations of like political elites or like celebrities are out of touch, or you tune into The View and you're like, well, Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, they are elitist. Yeah. Like, of course, they nonchalant are behind Joe Biden and pretend that Marianne Williamson doesn't exist. Like, they literally are fueling that fire. And like, what I'm curious about to address, not the elephant in the room, but the child in the room, which I think is beautiful, William, is you are a father and, the personal is always political. And when you were running for politics, like, how important was it to have conversations with those who, you were talking to those on the other side. Like you had to talk a lot to Republicans or to independents, right? Independents actually are like usually the biggest base um, in terms of a political party in every town are the independents. And what I find so fascinating is you must have had to understand what is it like to try to convince someone, especially since you have a master's in being a political analyst and public policy. So,
Yeah.
what was that common theme? Was it that you're a father? Like, what was it that changed the hearts and minds of those who you didn't think would actually be behind you? Spring has sprung here on Long Island, and I'm excited to talk about the Soapbox NY, a bath and body boutique located in historic Port Jefferson Village. My good friend Janine Cucci co-owns the Soapbox NY. Not only has she been on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room podcast, but she's also been on my good friend Christian Garcia's podcast. So she gave me a special spring scent from her blending bar. You might ask, Andrew, what is the blending bar? Well, it's what makes the Soapbox NY so unique, in my opinion. They have over 200 essential oils that can be made into shower gel, bubble baths, shampoo, body lotion, an essential oil roller, or even perfume. So, the first scent that I want to highlight is called Peony Blush Suede, an exquisite floral with delicate rose and honey accents and a subtle green freshness. The second is Mimosa and Tonka with notes of sweet golden mimosa mixed with creamy Tonka bean. And the third is Spring Musk, green and fresh with notes of bergamot, orange blossom, and neroli, a clean and fresh musk. So head over to soapboxny.com to place your order. Make sure you follow the Soapbox NY on Instagram, where you also could DM Janine with any questions. And make sure you tell her that Andrew from Ivory Tower Boiler Room sent you. Are you looking for a new magazine to read where you can get so many book, film, and TV recommendations? Well, then you need to check out the Gay and Lesbian Review. The G&LR is a bi-monthly magazine of history, culture, and politics that publishes essays in a wide range of disciplines, as well as a slew of reviews of books, plays, and movies, and a number of special features. Each issue brings you consistently intelligent, lively, thought-provoking articles focused on a unifying theme. So, for example, their new issue for May and June is called The Celluloid Fishbowl. And it's a nod to Vito Russo's 1981 book called The Celluloid Closet, which documented the flashes of LGBT content in movies before Stonewall when such content was strictly forbidden. So there's so many exciting articles in the May and June issue, including one by Andrew White called Queer Ghosts on Oscar Night that covers so many different LGBTQ films, both when the characters come out of the closet and what happens when characters are already openly queer and they don't need to come out of the closet, like we're seeing with so much of TV and film and literature right now. There's also an article by Andrew Holleran, the acclaimed writer of Dancer from the Dance, who actually reviews All of Us Strangers, which I can't wait to watch and has been much talked about. So please make sure that you use the Ivory Tower Boiler Room code ITBR50 when you go on glreview.org. You'll see on the right side, it says subscribe. You can either subscribe for their digital edition, or if you're like me, I like to still get the magazine delivered as a print magazine. There's nothing just like having a print magazine in front of you. So use ITBR50 to get 50% off of your G&LR subscription. Yes, that's 50% off. So enjoy your reading. And please, if you are subscribing to the Gay and Lesbian Review, and if there's an article you really enjoyed, or a review you really liked, or a guest that you really want me to interview from the Gay and Lesbian Review, make sure that you DM me at Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Happy reading, everyone. And thank you to the Gay and Lesbian Review for their sponsorship.
Well, I lost Andrew, so apparently I didn't convince enough of them. But no, I didn't lose for lack of convincing. It's, being up against $1 million campaign when you're running a $40,000 campaign, and one guy who has 30 years of name recognition versus a newcomer. So I want to put out there that, like, when you run, that's the first hill to climb, right? Is name recognition. I wasn't expected to win. So when I ran, it was about getting certain issues out there, the landfill, and it's sad, but I was correct in everything I said about what was going on with the landfill, because we've seen it. They are now not closing it. They've just announced as of last week.
Oh, wait, what is
they
the landfill? Just for those who don't know.
I'm sorry, the Brookhaven landfill. So the whole issue, and I'm going to answer your question, but real quick, whole issue is the Brookhaven landfill, where our waste goes. They take the garbage. Brookhaven does. We have Covanta, which is a waste plant, burn the garbage, then pay us to take the ash back, and we spread the ash at the landfill. There are multiple lawsuits, including a whistleblower lawsuit, alleging that the ash is toxic that's put at the landfill, and there's been dozens of cancer cases surrounding the landfill, and basically people dying and getting sick around the landfill in Brookhaven, Yaphank area. So that's the issue with the landfill, and there was a lot more to it, but basically I made that my cause. I made the roads and infrastructure my cause, the animal shelter, which was a mess, my cause. And so anyway, it's easier to speak to the other side when the issues are all local. I think it's harder since I ran because COVID happened and January 6th happened, and now Biden's in office. So the Trump people is like, when your guy is in office, you're a little bit more willing to hear the other side. She's like, okay, whatever, we're winning, we're in there, I'll listen to you, I don't vote for all. And then when the other guy's in office, it's, I am not entertaining one person from that party coming to speak to me. It really is. That's how the Democrats were in 2019. Now the Democrats are more like, maybe I'll vote for a Republican, like many of them locally. So it kind of flipped. But I think we're as divided as we were in 2019 when I ran. I think we're actually more divided now, and it's very sick. But with that, I'll start off by saying it might surprise you to learn that the majority of voters in any town usually are not independents or what we call unaffiliated, have no party or blank. The majority are Republicans or Democrats, and then Dems and Republicans respectively have a plurality over independents. So there is kind of this mindset in both parties now, especially the Dem party, where it's like, just target Democrats. Just don't worry about anyone. Just talk to Democrats. Get your base out. But there's not like, when you stop growing, you start dying. And when your mentality is, I'm not going to talk to either side, then basically you're inviting them to come over to your side and see how much support they can grab from you. And I've always said, like, you don't need to, like, you're not going to win every Republican or even close to it, but you got to get more Republicans than they get from you. You got to take more from the other person's side than they take from yours. And on Long Island, they do take a healthy number of Democrats, so you have to be out there. And look, my mentality was going to doors with Republicans is that I'm going to be happy, whether it's Republican, Democrat, whoever, I'm going to be happy to be there. I'm going to respect them on their property. And I'm not going to bullshit them. I'm not going to go to them and say, oh, I'm not like those other Democrats. I actually believe a lot of right-wing bullshit that you do. You know, the way I did it, and it got me respect from folks at doors. I go, look, I'm not going to lie. I bet we'll disagree on 90% of policies out there. But it's that 10% that's really important to both of us that I believe I can deliver on and the other guy can't. And let me explain why. That's what I do. I'm not gonna insult their intelligence. I'm not gonna pretend like at the door, I'm like, oh yeah, average Joe, I drink my 6-pack too, and oh yeah, I hate these immigrants too, and oh yeah, this is, these Democrats are so liberal and wokeness, and then you're gonna look me up on Facebook and be like, what the fucking AOC hell is this? Like, I'm aware that you can find me on multiple platforms. You're going to see that I don't believe everything you believe. So I'm not in the business of lying to people. Well, apparently I am in the business of lying to people, but I don't personally subscribe to that method. So I would rather just respect you, not lead with what we disagree about, but lead with what's important and zero in on the goals that I think can benefit everybody. And it's easier to do a local office, but I think it can be done with, congressional reps and people in federal office. I mean, it starts with representation. If they think you're going to work harder, they might just vote for you. I always say this, you can go to a door of somebody or who's a member of the other party, and they might disagree with everything and be like, "Ah, Democrats not interested. Oh, Republicans not interested." But if you're nice, you're courteous, and they feel like, "Wow, he actually came to my door. Nobody comes to my door." They are one negative interaction with the other candidate away from switching over to you. And they'll say, "You know what? I'm voting Republican this year, but that Will Ferraro, he came to my door. He was really cool to me. And the other guy's an asshole. So you know what? Boom. That'll be the one that I vote for this year." I've seen it all the time. It takes one bad interaction with the other guy. And as soon as the other person is at one of your voters' doors, like your party, you better get there too. Otherwise, you are just one bad impression away from losing them.
Well, and I always say that even though we have a two-party system, but there is the Independence Party.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's because I've
Well,
been
no,
looking
they're
at.
out. So as a statewide party, they're actually gone. You cannot register as an independent anymore. But I get what you're saying. Like in most states that don't have
Well, I'm
like
coming from
natural
New Jersey's perspective. So I was in New Jersey a
Oh,
lot,
okay.
Will, and New Jersey has
Gotcha.
more independents in towns than Democrats and Republicans.
Gotcha. Okay. No, I thought because we actually have a party that's called the Independent. People get
Yeah,
confused here.
yeah.
We have a
No, no, no.
party that's
I was
called the
talking about like, oh,
just
like
people who don't have an
countrywide.
affiliation. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Got it.
Unaffiliated.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. It gets confusing in New York. New York's weird like that.
Yeah, well, right, because some states unaffiliated can vote in a primary, but in a lot of states, you have to choose Democrat or Republican to vote, which I always say,
Yes.
why can't you let anyone who's registered to vote in a primary? But
True.
would that then, with the system, the old guard system, would that disrupt them too much?
You know what? The fear has always been that the other side's going to come and storm our primary, and people have attempted to organize. Actually, right now, Democrats are trying to do that to Trump. It has never worked because the bottom line is that like most people from the other party are just not going to go to the opposite primary. Like they're just not going to do it. You're not going to get that many people to do it. But what could happen is that people who are in the middle, who might ideologically identify with your party, will go there. And so I am actually a fan of the open primary system. Or there's like we have a closed primary, which is just you could just vote in your own party's primary, and then there's a semi-open primary, which is you can choose one primary, but you can't do both. I like that. I like the semi-open one. I think that's fair.
So, how much do you feel like you learned academically about politics really applies to the everyday life of what we're currently seeing of this reality
Zero.
TV? Yeah, it's like a reality TV show.
Zero. Fucking zero. And I told Suffolk Community College this, and I joked with like Dr. Salins, who's the well, I don't think he's the head of the public policy department anymore at Stony Brook. I think that's Leonie Huddy, who's great. She was my statistics professor. No, she was my public polling professor. But he's still like important there and everything like that. And I joked, I was like, look, they should get me in the classroom because I have the academic end, but I've worked in every area of government and politics. I've run campaigns. I've been a candidate. I would be like one of their only people who's actually been out there doing it. And I can tell you, like at Suffolk Community College, where I was talking with them about like actually running my own class there. Like I would come up with the curriculum. It would have been on campaigns, but I just couldn't make it work. I just didn't have the time to do it. I have a full-time job. It would have been like a weekend thing. Honestly, like you go to these departments, most of them, it's like find me one, maybe two people who've had real world political experience. Most of them have just been in academia, and you will not learn anything. You will learn structurally how to think of things. And I think the best thing that you learn in academia is the research end and what makes a good source, what makes a bad source, and structural thinking. That is super important. I think more like our society would be better off if more people knew that stuff. And I think they should teach that in high school and middle school. Like, okay, what's a good source? What's a bad? How to identify misinformation, how to double check the source. Like that is so important now. But in terms of like how politics works, you'll learn like history, the historical perspective, but you will not learn jack shit about how this works until you get involved.
Yeah, well, and as an LGBTQ like literature scholar, I always say like what makes the best recipe is when you can have the theory meet the praxis. Like the praxis is when the everyday life meets those abstractions, but there's like that gray in between area. Kind of like, I always say reality TV is a good example of this because it's not actually everyday reality. It's as if you turned the volume up to 100 and almost like podcasting in a way, like we're having a very heightened conversation, not like a conversation, even though Will and I have conversations in the gym. This is a more turned up version, but
Yeah.
we need those theoretical ideas in the back pocket to try to come up with talking points and to spew out brainstorming sessions. But yeah, I love
Yeah.
what you're saying about the university. It's like what I've always advocated is we actually need people from the industrial experience who have those degrees to come to the students and
Yeah.
meet them halfway to actually see the application. But
Well, there are a lot of people from the Stony Brook end who could do that, who've gone on from Stony Brook to become candidates, to become elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. But if they were interested in coming back and teaching, the whole process with Stony Brook, I mean, they could actually do it much easier at Suffolk Community College. The whole thing with Stony Brook is like they want you, not only in their master's program, like they want you getting their PhD. Like they're not even going to entertain you becoming anything more. Like you won't even be an adjunct if you don't have a PhD track. Whereas like Suffolk, you could actually become a full-time professor. So sometimes you get like better experiences that way because at Stony Brook, like they want you on that track because they want you paying into their system. And, consequently, they want to be able to pay you while basically deducting your PhD, your tuition from your pay in a way. That was that whole issue. I think it's still going on now, but a couple of years ago, and I was part of this protest. I think that might be how I met you, or you became aware of me, where I marched with the student professors, what's it called? What's their terminology? Like the adjunct professors, the 75% of professors at Stony Brook who are actually PhD students.
yeah, they call us teaching assistants, but technically
Right.
we're instructors.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So yeah, I mean, it's like they want you on that track for good reason.
Well, yeah, to pull the wool off of everyone's eyes. Like you get a stipend to get a PhD. Well, or you
Yeah.
should. Like I would never suggest someone pay tuition for a PhD. Usually you
Right.
get it funded from the university with the agreement that you're going to teach courses for the university. So instead of them having to hire full-time faculty, which is a lot of money for them, they then hire these PhD students who are then like they'll remove their tuition, but in exchange you need to teach and
Yeah.
you're kept at like adjunct level pay.
Yeah, and it's I don't think that's the best system. You could take those same individuals and be like, you know what, why don't you go off and work in the field and come back? We don't even need you to get the PhD. Why don't you come back and teach with a master's? Or you could get the PhD if you want and you could get it for free. But we'd like you to get that experience. And I think that's one component that Stony Brook misses. And I just say that as somebody who's proud former. I love Stony Brook University, but I think that they could do better from that perspective. I do think universities generally, it's not just a Stony Brook problem, it's a university problem in general, it's an academia problem. I think you miss out on people who have very valuable real world experiences who also understand how to teach academically, get people thinking systematically about things.
And especially now with such a shakeup in education with how limited jobs are in academia or in like the more theoretical thinking side of the humanities or what name you. I feel like the undergrad students, like I get interns, Will, for the podcast from Stony Brook, and they're all humanities based, mostly English, and they really are in need of media training. They're in need of like understanding journalism, entertainment fields, and a lot of faculty, and this is no fault of you, faculty, if you're listening, I respect you all, but there is no incentive, like Will's saying, for you to leave a university system after getting your PhD and then finding an industrial job and then coming back, which I think really should be part of our system, because if you don't get trained in, say, publication or media or, broadcasting or, I don't know, corporate marketing. But then you're saying to your undergrad students, well, with an English major, you could be a publicist, a radio personality. And I'm thinking, but wait, you're faculty who haven't had industrial training. So how can we tell that to our students without giving them resources? Or at least, having representative faculty from those other industries.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you're exactly right. What I did, so after I got my bachelor's at St. John's, I actually that's when I went and lived upstate in Albany, and I worked for the New York State Assembly during that 2 year. And like my original goal was to either attend Syracuse I think that was the Woodrow Wilson Public Policy School, or go to Harvard if I could have gotten in. I think I would have had a shot at it, but that's the JFK School of Government. And I actually would have had to work a little bit longer. Like they require that you work in between. So because those are my goals, that's why I had elected to work in between my bachelor's and my master's. So I took time between them for that purpose. And then I just decided like, hey, I didn't even know Stony Brook had a public policy department. And it was just with the state tuition, because I just wasn't getting a break from any other university that accepted me. And I was just like, you know what, it's close by. I've been away from law. My now wife at the time was my girlfriend who I was planning on getting engaged to. There was that component. I've been away like way too long. So it was really convenient for me to go to Stony Brook, but I did take time in between to learn. And I really got quite an education working up in Albany at a crazy time too. During that whole Elliot Spitzer scandal, when he got tagged for the whole like prostitution scandal and had to step down as governor. I was there for that. I was there for when the New York State Senate, where the Democrats and Republicans were fighting about who really had the majority, because one member switched from party to party and he cut a deal with both sides. So they were running separate sessions in the Senate saying we're the real majority. No, now here's the other real majority coming in. It was weird, but I learned a lot being up there. I really did.
Yeah.
Learned what not to do.
It's interesting you mentioned Elliot Spitzer, because I was just listening to Chelsea Handler's podcast and she had Z-Way on. I'm not sure if you know Z-Way, but like she's this provocateur, comedian, host. But she'll like invite a guest on, and she just had on George Santos, and like she grills them and it's this whole shtick. But like, I wonder, what do you think of a George Santos who like is from Long Island? Well, he's from New York City, Queens, but represents Nassau County and Queens sections, I think. But who now is kind of making this whole like trailblazing satirical jick out of his whole run and who he is as a person. Like, how has it now become personalities are running politics and that celebrity culture? Hi, this is Dr. Andrew Rimby, and I'm really excited to talk to you all about one of our ITBR sponsors, Broadview Press. Broadview Press is an independent academic publisher in the humanities that produces high-quality, pedagogically useful books for use in university and college classrooms. They publish mainly in English studies, writing, philosophy, and history. They are always publishing with an eye towards diversity, building a strong list of titles from women, people of color, and authors from other marginalized groups. If you haven't heard my Broadview Press interviews, you need to. Recently, I just had on Dr. Shannon Day, who talked about her book, Beyond the Binary, Thinking About Sex and Gender. And in the summer, I had on Dr. Jason Holt, who gave us all a comprehensive history of what it means to be a philosopher who studies sporting culture. And of course, we went back to ancient Greek, literature, mythology, history, to look at the roots of athleticism. And last year, I had on Dr. Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock, who's actually going to be coming on the podcast soon to give his thoughts on the new Fall of the House of Usher Netflix series. He talked all about pop culture for beginners. And Broadview Press is offering an exclusive discount because of our sponsorship. So head to broadviewpress.com, where you're going to see such a wide range of literature. Use the code Ivory Tower, IVORYTOWER, for 20% off site-wide all of their books. Again, it's broadviewpress.com. Enjoy your reading. You've heard me gush over my friend Christian Garcia's podcast called That Old Gay Classic Cinema. Yes, Christian Garcia, who hosts the Smash Rewatch podcast series with me. Remember Smash, where they're putting on a Marilyn Monroe Broadway musical called Bombshell? Well, make sure you listen to our podcast series. His podcast is called That Old Gay Classic Cinema, and it is definitely meant for all of those Turner Classic Movie lovers. So he looks at classic films with a queer lens. So think of him as a queer cinema professor of sorts. He actually had on co-owner of the Soapbox NY, Janine Cucci, to talk about Sunset Boulevard, which the three of us are just obsessed with Sunset Boulevard, and we can't wait for Nicole Scherzinger to be in the revival of Sunset Boulevard on Broadway. He also has episodes about Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Strangers on a Train. Now that definitely is a queer homoerotic film. The Philadelphia Story, Meet Me in St. Louis, Beauty and the Beast, Sweet Charity, Psycho, Mary Poppins, Hello Dolly, The Wizard of Oz, Vertigo, which I actually was on, and 101 Dalmatians, and the list can go on and on and on. So make sure that you listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get podcasts, like Spotify or Apple. Follow Christian on Instagram at That Old Gay Classic Cinema, and he also has a TikTok. And please make sure that you reach out to him and let him know that you heard this ad on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. Happy podcast listening.
You've all heard me gush about Mandy Made It. Mandy Made It is a craft business, and it's actually owned by my friend Mandy Bengal, who I have known, married to Pippi has known. We all actually became best friends in Main Stage Center for the Arts summer theater camp. So I'm so proud of Mandy. First, she has an arts festival coming up on April 28th. It's called the Gloucester Township Arts Market and Green Fair. There are going to be art vendors, craft vendors, including Mandy, food trucks. It sounds so much fun. I actually am thinking maybe I'm going to attend. So it's in South Jersey, and it's April 28th, a Sunday from 10 to 3 p.m. So go over to @MandyMadeIt to find out more information about how you can attend the festival. And please, if you see Mandy, say, oh, I listened to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, and that's how I know about your crochet company. So she makes so many wonderful items, especially because we're in the spring into summer. I know that she makes beautiful spring flowers that she crochets. She's made wonderful Pokemon inspired items. I know that my boyfriend, loves Pokemon Go, so this is a great item for him. I actually got my boyfriend a Mandy Made It Scream Ghostface bouquet for Valentine's Day. He loved it. She makes wonderful Disney inspired items. She made me a Hocus Pocus bed and breakfast item, Snow White and the Evil Queen's poisoned apple item. I know she's made Married to Pippi so many true crime items. We're in talks right now to have her make some Ivory Tower Boiler Room crochet items. Make sure that you reach out to Mandy Made It. Let her know that you heard this ad on the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. She loves knowing that you're listening to her ad on the podcast, and also she'll give you an exclusive item at Mandy Made It on Instagram and Facebook.
That's the way it was in ancient Rome, not to get like too professor-like, but before there was political parties, parties were just a function of personality. So you would have like the Caesar crew, you would have the Polio crew, or whoever. It's like all these different Roman personalities, and it would just, you'd be in their crew, and that was the party, right? And they would make alliances. As it pertains to today, first of all, the way you get a George Santos, it's a couple of things. Number one, the media didn't do its fucking job. Newsday did not do his job until after the election. This is what Newsday does. They wait until the wrong person gets elected, and then they come out with like their whole their whole expose, and they say, well, we didn't want to come out with it during the election because that might have swayed the election. You fucking think? Maybe the election deserved to be swayed. I mean, Jesus Christ, Donald Trump became president because James Comey wrote a goddamn letter about Hillary Clinton. Talk about swaying an election. My God, there's no single document in American history that swayed an election more than that. Jesus.
Yeah, wait, what
Maybe,
was that called? The October surprise or
yeah,
yeah.
right. And then his follow-up letter, oh, never mind, that we didn't really find anything. We're investigating letter number 1. Number 2, it's okay. And then enraged people even more because they thought the fix was in. But getting back to Santos, Newsday, that was information that the voter needed. This was not, okay, we're going to like report on some dirt that's just going to muddy them up right before November. It's like, this is information the voter needs. But the other thing it speaks to is because some of that stuff had already come out, and I have to say the campaign, I forget his name, Robert something or other, who ran against Santos, their campaign committed campaign malpractice by not putting out that information themselves. They sent it to the media and said, do our dirty work for us. And that was a mistake. They should have got on that and made it so that the media had no choice but to report on that. But the Republican Party, though, what does it really speak to? The lack of standard there. I mean, they will vote for anybody, and this is the impact that Trump has had on our politics, is that he's dropped the standard. Like, there's no scandal anymore that'll get you in trouble in the Republican Party. I will say, from personal experience, like the Democrats, like we're almost a little too sensitive about everything. We're like the smallest looking thing will be like, well, they can't run now. With the Republicans, I mean, they literally could commit murder in front of everybody, and as long as it's like some MAGA Republican that, like, the people support, they'll no problem, you're on the ballot. Like, I feel like there used to be a standard to which if you did something, you were out. Like, I could name countless examples of presidential campaigns that were over because the person said one really bad thing, or one bad thing came out about them, and that was it. And they weren't forced out. They were like willingly, nope, I'm out now, because that's just the way it is. And that wasn't always fair, but now we've swung the other end where like a George Santos is out and it's like, yeah, he's a fraud, he's this, he's that, and it's like no problem. And it just got so bad with him that they finally just had to remove him. Even his own party had to, and most of them voted to keep him in. It was the Democrats who got him out, and it was a sampling of Republicans who joined in that got him out. But like most of that party was trying to keep him in. It was other New York Republicans who were like, listen, dude, like we got to run on the same ballot as this guy. We need him out now. That's why he's out. So it's a lack of reporting. It's because Newsday and other publications like them are so short-staffed and are just running on ad revenue while they keep their employees making dirt and having way too much to work on, so they don't actually report on anything, and the best writers don't work for them anymore, so they go off and make their real money somewhere else. So you get high school level journalism combined with one party having zero standard where they run for office.
Yeah. So, I know this is going to be contested, or I'm sure you have a certain opinion, which is great about this, but I know there's a lot of in the Democratic Party. I mean, the Republican side, I think, is pretty against Trump being off the ballot. But like the Democrats are kind of going back and forth. Like I've heard with Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, and Cenk Uygur, they just had a debate on News Nation for the Democratic primary. But again, I think it was just more important, like you said, to hear their ideas and maybe push the Biden campaign or the DNC to like listen to the people. But what I liked about, but what I liked about their opinions is I could see both sides. Like one side said, no, he should be held like to the standard of not inspiring an insurrection, which is treasonous. But then Marianne's side was, but he wasn't actually convicted. So like, maybe this is just providing even more fuel for the MAGA side to like see that if a Democrat wins, that they're going to invalidate them. But my feeling is, Will, can we really quench the fire of, the MAGA side or even any kind of in-group fighting? Like, can we actually stop that? Or does it not matter because we're so divided anyway that there's just going to be outcries no matter who wins in 2024?
Well, my feeling, and I speak with a lot of Democrats about this very issue, and a lot of us are torn about it in terms of like, should Trump belong on the ballot and what's the impact of that? I think you realistically have to look at it from two different angles. There's two different angles at play. There's what is right and legal and just. And then there is what is the real world impact. And I think both questions are of near equal importance. Some people just go, nope, you stand on the law and you stand what's unjust. You stand for justice. That's not how reality works, because the court of public opinion and the court of emotion is just as at play, if not more so, than the court of law. When it comes to politics, because it's a perception game. It's about perception. What's just doesn't win the ballot. I didn't think it was just that Trump was even, won. Then I think we were sunk the moment he won a nomination in 2016 for the Republican Party, because he took over that party, which is horrible for politics. But if you ask me, does he belong on the ballot? I don't think he does. I think he belongs in jail. I'm sorry. I think he should have been arrested. Like, what are we doing? January 6th. And if you ask me, I think all the Russia stuff, they never said he wasn't cooperating with them and handing them information that they shouldn't have had. They just said it's not for us, the Justice Department, to make that decision. And it was up to Congress to kind of prosecute from there. That's what they said. So he was never cleared of that whole. So there's a lot of reasons why I think Trump should either be in jail, in court, and definitely not on a ballot. But I don't think it's a good idea to remove him from the ballot. I think it looks bad. And I think as divided as we are, if you remove a major, if one major party is seen from preventing not only their own, because let's be honest, the DNC is already preventing other Democrats from being on the ballot in the primary. Okay, this is already happening. So if you have that, and then you look at the general election and the other party's major candidate that, like, love him or hate him, they're all pretty much behind him. Like, he's got major support there and owns that party. If tens of millions or 100 million, however many it is, tens of millions of people cannot get the candidate they want on the ballot because the other side said no, or is perceived as saying no, even though in some states it's actually the Republicans bringing the lawsuit to kick him off the primary ballot. A lot of people don't know that. It's actually Republicans trying to kick him off as much as Democrats. If that happens, the impact is, well, we don't live in a democracy anymore. And so the rules change. And so now when the other side has power, what are they going to do? Is now legitimate to get your side kicked off. And now you have to worry about, okay, how many judges did they appoint in this court and that court? Oh, there's a lawsuit to kick our candidate off the ballot. Gee, I hope it's not at the DC Court of Appeals in this circuit, which is appointed mostly by Trump people. And, I don't want politics to be about like which side appointed which judge in which court, which so often it becomes about. Like, do you have a right to an abortion? I don't know. I guess it depends on what state you're in, right? It depends on what justice is on the court at a given year. So the justice system itself is so unjust that I don't trust it to oversee our democracy in a lot of ways. So I would rather him, look, if that's who they want, fine. If that's their candidate, Donald Trump, get him on the ballot and fucking beat him. Beat him. And if we can't beat him, it's not their fault, it's our fault. We should be able to beat Donald Trump. We should have beat him in 2016. It shouldn't have even been as close as it was in 2020. And Biden should beat him again, though I have my doubts because of how much they've dropped the ball. Sorry to be a doom and gloom guy, but I'm just giving you like my opinion. So I don't know. I go back to one of my old martial arts instructors taught me about fighting in the street with a weapon. We'd have all these weapon training seminars and all. And there's a lot of fight psychology and thinking about the fight and street fights. And it's about what happens when a weapon is introduced into a fight. If multiple attackers are coming to me, should I grab a weapon? And he would always say, well, be careful, because if they don't have weapons first and you introduce a new weapon into the fight, guess what? If you lose that weapon, you better hang on to it, because if you lose it, now they're going to use it on you because you said it was okay to use that weapon. So be careful what you introduce into the fight. If it's a weapon that you can't control moving forward, maybe it's best not to bring it to the street. And that's what they're doing now. This is a new weapon now. It's not something that's been done before. So okay, now you're gonna kick our person off the ballot. Guess what? Fair game moving forward. And I just don't want to see democracy become part of it. And I would hate for Trump to be a martyr for the rest of his life. Just beat him. Just beat him.
Basically, you set precedent, is what you're saying. And
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, and something like, as we're nearing like wrapping up, I'm just so curious about, with your martial arts training, but even like just that like fitness commonality we have. I'm just curious, do you see like any similarities between like what is it about athletic culture or like working out that like also just ties into like keeping you zen? Is it about like the mindset that it gives you? Is it about, you know, like just how improving your body improves your mind, like in that philosophical ancient Greek way, or like just like seeing those who share this commonality and like bonding over like a group activity?
I'm going to leave you all on that lingering question because I actually have another 20 minutes or so with William where we discuss our passion for fitness, why working out actually does have something to do with our thoughts on politics and keeping your mind and your body strong, and why we all really need to practice mindfulness, endurance training, and making sure that we have a headspace where we can focus on ourselves so that way we can show up for others in our life and show up in productive ways. So I will be releasing part 2 of this conversation in about a week. So I hope you all tune in to more with William, where we turn away from politics and detour into the fitness world.